Okay.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I believe we're recording.
Yeah, we're on. We're
So
good.
we're
We're
back.
good. So
A
hopefully
third
the first
attempt,
part.
a second attempt,
Oh,
a second
hopefully
attempt
that
for
first.
part two. Part one was fine.
Okay.
There
Hopefully
were
the
a few
first part with the.
issues.
Hopefully the part with the books got through because that's just some interesting source material. Um, so we were talking about where she was living, where Sharon, the different places around California that she's lived and that are still there. So we mentioned the Santa Monica Beach house, which is still there. You can walk right up to it. It's on right on the beach, still there, still painted. I think very much like it did, like it was back then. And the interesting overlap. Cary Grant lived there before Sharon lived there. Also before Sharon lived at Cielo Drive. Cary Grant honeymoon there. So it's there's a lot of
Also lived
connections.
in Cielo Drive, yeah.
So from there, she went to from Chateau Marmont to from that beach house, I think was to the chateau, and then to Summit Ridge Drive, where they lived till the end of '68. And that house is still there. Up, it's a different part of Benedict Canyon, but it's still Benedict Canyon up on the top. You can walk right up to it. Still looks a lot like it did back then, Patty Duke's house. And the funny thing is that, according to most published sources, Roman and Sharon wanted to buy that house, but she and Patty Duke's husband couldn't agree on a price. I don't know if I think you told me that story. So if they had bought that house, obviously there would have been no tragedy later on, or at least it wouldn't have unfolded like it did. And then from there, they found the Cielo Drive house, which at this point I would encourage anybody who's watching to look for Tina's video about the history of Cielo Drive. It's probably one of your most popular videos, I think. It's under Terry Melcher and More, History of Cielo Drive. Isn't that right, Tina?
Correct. I
Yeah.
think it would be much easier and less time consuming for them to probably read my thread on Twitter where they can dip in and out at any given moment rather than watch a 20-minute video. I believe it's 20 minutes, a 20-minute video of me ranting.
No, it's really good. It's really well
So I
history of that
I
house.
don't know if that's what people like to hear. I don't know if that's I don't know. I think I would get a headache and probably want to kill myself as well if I had to listen to myself for 20 minutes straight
No,
nonstop.
no,
So
stop.
perhaps it's a better option to read the Twitter thread where you
No,
can
it's
dip in and
well,
out and not get a headache. I don't
the
know.
video is very good. It's not that
I
long,
don't
but it
know.
does. If you want the history of that house, which is no longer there, watch Tina's video, "The History of Cielo Drive." It's got like 18 or 19,000 views. It's despite what she's saying right now, it is very well done. So her real estate agent
Um,
who found that house for her, I think is still alive. Her name's Elaine something. I can't remember. She's been on some shows talking about that. She found the house on Cielo Drive for Sharon and Roman. And interestingly enough, it took a lot of harping on Altabelli to get him to rent them that house. For some reason, he had a bad feeling and didn't. That was in one of the documentaries from way back in the day. He had some
well,
issues renting.
he was a strange personality anyway. He was a
He was
strange
an out there
person
guy.
anyway.
Yeah.
Um, that being said, on a side note, it's very funny for me, Tim, when I see names like Vincent Bugliosi, and I'm Greek, so I say his name is Bugliosi. I'm going to say it as I see it. So Bugliosi, Rudy Altabelli. It's funny because I have to remind myself that these guys are Americans, like they're Italian Americans, but like in my mind, I feel like they have Italian accents.
Well, they're
They're
very
such
Italian
Italian
names.
names, but
Yeah.
they're Americans, obviously, so they don't talk like that. But
No.
it's funny because with Rudy Altabelli, I always imagined him with an Italian accent and just being, because he was always described as like this fancy, kind of sassy guy for his time, like an openly gay man in the 60s, talent agent, whatever.
Yeah, which could have saved
And
a career.
also property owner.
Mhm.
Rudy Altabelli, I always imagined him with a funny Italian accent, but I just know that's not accurate because um, but yeah, like Vincent, he has a lawyer's voice, like he has a rich
Mhm.
man's voice, and he's a
Mhm.
Leo. So I love his voice. You know, I love his voice. He has a very rich man voice. That's how I describe it.
But it's
But
also
I think,
rather. He
yeah,
speaks with a rather nasal kind of voice like this. Very deliberate,
he
very articulate,
does.
very determined, and
Very shrewd.
shrewd.
Very
Yep.
shrewd, because that's how lawyers talk. He kind
Mhm.
of reminds me of I don't know if you know that political commentator. I don't really watch him. I've only seen a few clips of him, like Ben Shapiro.
Mhm.
His cadence and stuff is kind
Yeah,
of
actually,
similar.
that's not a bad
Um,
comparison. Yeah.
and like his voice, you can tell he's a very shrewd personality, very sharp. And I Googled him. I Googled to see his education or whatever, and I'm pretty sure he studied law. I hope I'm accurate. I know this is not about Ben Shapiro, but Ben Shapiro education. And I was like, I knew he studied Harvard Law School, University of Harvard University, JD. I don't know. He has a degree in law. That's what I know.
Okay.
I
You're
know
up.
he has a degree in law, and I knew it just from the way that he spoke because he's shrewd, articulate, like strong. Like you can just tell, like from the way that he speaks, like that's a lawyer's voice, and it's like
Mhm.
Vincent's voice. It
Yeah.
reminds me of Vincent's voice.
Yeah.
Um,
Very deliberate with the mannerisms. Very deliberate in the way he speaks with his points. Any interview he gives, he's
yes.
very articulate and point by point. Not a lot of fluff. Just here are the facts as I know them, and that's how he presented his. And if you look at the Helter Skelter book with the account of the trial, he's very much described that way. Back to this book for just a minute. One of the really good things that this book does is, I think I mentioned in our first episode, this takes you through a really detailed account of what the Cielo Drive property looked like geographically, from where you walked into this to the layout of the house to the different things that were on the property. And I think the thing that, and Sharon described that many times as, her love house. She loved that place. It was isolated. It was at the top of Benedict Canyon. It had plenty of privacy. There were trees everywhere. It was 3 acres of just kind of bucolic splendor. If you look at if we know what it looks like, but if you look at old pictures of that house, it was a beautiful property, stunning, some of the best views in the city, and she fell in love with it, as did a lot of people who lived there over the years. Henry Fonda, Cary Grant, Altabelli himself. And there were a couple of, later on, Trent Reznor, the last resident before the house was torn down. The people who lived there loved that property, and it's unfortunate that it gets linked into the tragic aspects of it. And again, we can't not talk about it because it did happen. But what we're doing is not focusing on that and focusing on other aspects. And the other thing that book talks about too.
Um,
Go ahead.
sorry. No, I wanted you to finish your point. Finish your
The other thing
point,
this book
please.
talks about too, which really isn't in any other account, is how she spent her time here, because they didn't live there very long. Roman left in March, end of March, after their housewarming party, and never came back there to live. Sharon lived there only about 6-7 weeks altogether. But after they moved in February of '69, she kind of spent those next few weeks before leaving to Europe getting the house ready. She knew that this was going to be a place she wanted to live for the foreseeable future. And there's some really interesting passages in that book about how she spent that time, buying house plants, buying furniture for this house, and really looking to settle in, which makes what happens, all the more sad. But the bigger point is she loved that property. She loved living there. And when her life ended, she was she was looking forward to the rest of her life, I think, raising her child. There was some turmoil there. Who knows what would have happened, but she was looking forward to being a mother. I think we can safely say that. And that was going to be
Mhm.
her next big focus for a long
I
time.
think it's very simple. It would have ended in divorce. She would have just waited to give birth to the baby so she could get anything she needed from Polanski, whether it was his surname, whether it was his inheritance, get rid of him, raise the child. And for everyone saying that she would have married Jay Sebring, that wouldn't have been the case. Jay Sebring was poor. He had money. Sharon wanted luxury, living in a rich, big home. Jay never had any money, so
Well,
she wouldn't have
Jay made a
married
lot of
him.
money. Jay had
And
made a lot of money, but he had a lot of debts
he
too.
did,
So
but he wasn't wealthy. He wasn't wealthy, Tim, and I think it really hurt Jay. Like, because I think he tried. I don't know if they were engaged, but she didn't marry him. Like, she
they
had to
were.
marry someone rich.
I think they were engaged for a while.
So
Yeah.
they were engaged, but she didn't marry him, and she wouldn't have married him. So that's one thing Deborah got correct. She wouldn't have married Jay Sebring. Um, I don't think she would have gotten married again. I think she would have had a child, but with
Again,
a different man.
hard to
Like I
say because
said,
we just don't know. But
I
I
that's
think
what I think.
it's very possible, and
That's
it's
what I
all
think.
we
That's what
just
I think. I think she would have had a kid like a second kid a decade later. But because it was the 70s. So it's not like people were like, oh, you have to get married. Like things were like it was a more liberal era.
Mm,
So but I think that because you did mention Cielo Drive, I believe before our initial video got cut off, I believe it was mentioned in this video on this take. I think what we can do actually is do a few episodes. Well, it would only take one or two at most, I think, um, of analyzing and looking into J. Sebring's home and Cielo Drive. And I think
mm,
the reason why we should do this is it's very important for me to establish, at least, that when it comes to the crimes, and I think something that I tried to analyze in the Cielo Drive video is that it's not so much about the personalities. It's not so much about Charlie trying to get back at Terry Melcher or whoever it was. It was because they resented the success of the home and what the home stood for. And something that I largely believe in is taking care of our homes, keeping them clean, being aware of who we invite into our homes, because I believe that not just homes, but buildings carry energies of
mm,
people who have walked into those buildings. They record events of things that have happened. So when really bad things happen, when there's brothel-like conditions, or there's a murder that takes place, or a place is filled with drugs and substances and dealers, the building in itself carries negative energy, it carries bad energy. So it's very, as sad as it was, because it was a beautiful home, the destruction of that home and rebuilding that home in 1994, I believe, was probably good to kind of erase the karma, if people are open to that sort of thing, the energy of that home. And I think actually the best person to talk to about this would maybe be David Omen, because I'm sure he
yes.
believes in the
Yeah.
energy of homes and buildings, transmuting energies of events and things that have happened. So I think it would be good and insightful for us to talk about the history of these homes and the dark histories that they carry as well, and looking into previous tenants that have lived there before the characters we explore.
It's funny.
Yeah.
That's true. It's after that, after what happened, and Olivia Hussey moved in. That the history didn't scare her because I think her account was, well, in England, all the homes are haunted, so everything has a history, so it's not a big deal to me. And she lived there without incident. And then it's interesting too to point out that Altobelli then lived there himself in the main house from like
Isolated
69 or
alone
70,
for years.
from like 69 or 70 to 1988 without incident. So yeah, you can certainly make the argument that there was some bad mojo going on that property. Um, what they
Yeah.
replaced it with is really atrocious, but that's another video. And yeah, David would be a lot of fun to talk. We'll give a quick plug to David. David's book, I have it, but I don't have it handy. It's called Ghosts of Cielo Drive. That's an interesting read for anybody who's interested in the history of the area, the history of LA, and the history of Benedict Canyon. He goes, it's mostly about his journey building his own home and what he's experienced there. And you can choose to believe that or not believe it. But he devotes a good amount of
Mhm.
pages to the history of the area and his experience getting the land that he built his house on and what that was all about in the history there. So it Ghosts of Cielo Drive, you can get it on his website. I think it's theomenhouse.com. Quick plug to David, because we like David. He's a cool guy. Um, Also a
I
book.
love David very much. I love David very much. I I briefly started speaking to him around maybe 2021, 2022, because I was interested in his home and I was interested in him and his insights. And I consider him someone to be very intuitive. I don't think I'm a fan of all those psychics in Los Angeles interrogating him all the time and trying to film his home so they can get it aired on their shows and their Ghostbuster shows or whatever, because I know
That's
that
fair.
people are into that. I will say, however, I believe that he's someone maybe spiritual, intuitive, and open to esoteric subjects. I think he just has an open mind and he's just open to anyone coming in and just giving their insights and stuff. But I would say maybe take a few things with a grain of salt, especially these Ghostbusters. Um,
He's a
and
really cool guy. I'm
what
sorry.
and what
David's
made me happy was that I rarely really post on Instagram, but I decided to post a photo, which I mostly post like headshots and stuff or whatever, professional shots, but I posted a photo of me outside Sloane Square, Sharon's home apartment back then, when she was acting early on in her career. The apartment further down to Roman Polanski's apartment where she lived with him later on. So she lived in this apartment with her coach and her Yorkshire Terrier, her acting coach. And there's actually a mini park that belongs to that place. A lot of politicians live down that road. I posted a photo. I visit that place all the time, but I just decided to take
It's a
another
very
photo.
swanky part of London, right? It's a very like wealthy part of the city right now.
It's really lovely and posh, and whenever I walk there, I genuinely feel, I don't know what it is, Tim. I don't know if it's the coats that I wear, but anytime I walk there, like I feel like the British people that pass by me, they're very gentlemanly, and they look at me as if I feel like I walk into the 60s every time I'm there. I know it sounds like a crazy phenomenon, but like even the people,
No,
there's a French style coffee shop, like a little like outside the station, and it's very like old school. It's very like I don't know, walking, even the people, the way they dress in that area, like I feel like I'm time traveling to the 60s. And people, I feel like it's a part of the world where I'm time traveling back to the
well,
60s, and I
we
can really
know,
see it for what it
Sharon.
is. That's crazy. I know it sounds crazy.
No. The outside of that building looks exactly like it did back in her day, and we know that she loved London. She spoke many times about loving London and feeling most at home in London. What you're saying isn't outrageous at all. I think now we it's important to look
Yeah.
at, okay, what is her real legacy? How should we remember her? And the unfortunate thing is, and I know why it happens, because people who tell the story, there's money in the crime, unfortunately. But it's important to remember her beyond victimhood and beyond just as a beautiful woman. This was a woman with a very kind heart, a gentle soul, who made everybody she ever interacted with feel like they mattered. And these are accounts from people that knew her. She was a unique human being, really, and beautiful inside
Hmm.
and out. And there's no way to justify on this earth the fate that she and her friends went through that night. But I think to really do her
Yeah.
justice, we have to remember her the way that we want to portray her in this series, which is as a living person who lived a lot of life in a very brief amount of
Yeah.
time, who had a lot of great experiences while she was here, and who left a legacy, of positivity and gentleness and beauty in every way.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even elaborate too much on the casual dating or the relationships, because
No,
I
it's not
don't
even
think
important.
I
It's not
think I think
important to
that's
the
what
story.
most biopics would do,
Mhm.
if I'm entirely honest. I think that if Hollywood decided to make a Sharon Tate biopic tomorrow, I bet you it would just be tension between Roman, and Jay Sebring, and the love triangle or whatever, because I think it's salacious gossip, and
And
I'm sure that that's what
none
many
of that has
people
anything to do
gossiped
with who
about.
these
But
people
I'm
are.
sure that's exactly. But I'm sure that that's what something most people gossiped about
Mhm.
when they saw them at house parties. Because if we think about Terry Melcher, for instance, and he's at a house party and he knows these people and he sees Roman Polanski and he sees Sharon Tate and he sees Jay Sebring and his girlfriend is Candice Bergen, who's an actress. So it would always be in his favor to kind of network with Roman Polanski, who's this upcoming great A-list director, to see how could he help his girlfriend Candice out. It would be very hard for him to approach someone like Sharon, or any man rather, if he sees Sharon constantly with Roman on one side, Jay Sebring on the other.
Mm.
It's You're not going to be
I
able to
think
approach her
that
when she
boils
has
down
those
to
two. So yeah,
that dichotomy is interesting. I think that whole thing, how close the three of them were, that really just boils down to the fact that Jay loved her and didn't want to let her go. He wanted to be close to her. And people in the documentary about Jay have said that, particularly one of his proteges, Larry Geller, who went on to be Elvis Presley's hairstylist for like the last 15 years of his life. He said that in that documentary, he's giving an interview, and he says that he saw Jay with a lot of different women over the years, because women like Jay and Jay like women. He was that kind of guy. He was magnetic. But he also said that he never saw another woman affect him the way that Sharon did. And there was something about him that always just wanted to be close to her in any way he could be, even though he knew that she was with somebody else. He wanted to be close to her. And we saw that in the final days of her. And that's another thing the King book goes into, is kind of looking at the last week or two of her life and how often Jay was with her. Jay saw her basically every day of the last 2 weeks of their lives, except for maybe a day or two here or there. So something in him, loved her and wanted to be close to her. And I don't think there's any doubt that Roman loved her too in his own way, because he was devastated when she died. However, his actions after that are questionable, but both of those guys loved her in their own way. And, Jay died defending her. He died trying to protect her. So I think that's why he insisted on just becoming Roman's friend too, is that he wanted to stay close to her because he loved her. And she was a remarkable person. And I think maybe he, more than anybody else, got that about her, about at least the men that she was with. He got just how remarkable she was. And it was a light that he wanted close to him all the time.
Yeah, and that's wonderful, but I don't think it's necessary to explore her relationships or her marriage, because I think that's what people would do. They would just delve into the private life and look into salacious gossip.
And it's not crucial to
I
her
don't
story.
think that's very, So I think actually, because I don't think anyone actually knows much about her interviews, her opinions, things about her, like actual things, stories about her, her preferences. I don't think they know about that, because she had in the few interviews that she gave, she had a few good things to say, her 2 cents on acting and her advice to young actresses, which is all very insightful, should I say.
It is,
especially at that age. Yeah.
It's and this is what we're doing, is not a Sharon Tate biopic. She's an important character in this series.
It's not. It's a Terry Melcher biopic.
If it's anybody, it's Terry's biopic. Yeah, but even there's a lot of characters.
It's Terry's biopic.
It's him. There's Jay. There's Sharon. There's the '60s itself as a character, the places as a character. So it's not just about, she's very important to this, but it's not just a straight biopic about her. So we don't need to explore all that stuff. What we want to do is,
to be fair, and you're absolutely right. If there's anything that's a big characteristic, like the main characters, is actually the setting of the whole series. Like, the setting is very important to me. Like, I consider the houses and the homes to be characters. I consider like the entertainment venues and the places where they would reside as like the main characters, because it's like Cass Elliott's home or whoever's place, Columbia Records, like the buildings for me are the characters, because they're so crucial. And not just the buildings. When I'm talking about like settings, I'm not just talking about homes, I'm talking about Laurel Canyon. So it wasn't until Tim actually informed me that Laurel Canyon is essential, because it's where all the musicians lived for the most part. And it's interesting because Laurel Canyon, there's a lot of places in Cyprus, for instance, that look like Laurel Canyon. And what's amazing is that these musicians, they weren't at the entertainment venues all night partying their brains out. They needed places of relaxation to get inspiration, to have a muse, to write. And the muse, my friends, was Laurel Canyon, because it was so peaceful.
This is the best.
So
we're going to do an episode in the future about
exploring
Laurel Canyon. We're going to do an episode just about that.
Absolutely.
I'll mention this briefly.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is really hard to find. This is Canyon of Dreams by Harvey Kubernik. Came out about 15 or 16 years ago. Long out of print now. If you can find a copy online, they're pretty expensive. I got lucky. I found this one cheap, relatively cheap. This is full of really cool pictures about Laurel Canyon. There's some stuff in here about Sharon, not a lot. Mostly it's about the musicians that lived there at the time. But there's some really cool shots in here. You can't really see it. That's Lou Adler, John Phillips, Michelle Phillips in Laurel Canyon. This book will be a heavy source for stuff about Laurel Canyon, because it covers everything. Beautiful book, really well written. Hard to find now, but talks about everybody. And you mentioned Cass Elliott's house. Cass Elliott's house is still there. Everybody who was anybody back then.
I'm mostly referencing it in terms of the drug scene and all the losers
just
going
the parties
there
that she held
and
there.
them stumbling into Charlie. I believe Charlie went to like Elvis's house 2 or 3 times and saw Sharon there, and Cass's house, if I recall correctly.
They
But
claimed they claimed
yeah,
they claimed to have been invited to Cass's house. Now, this is where it gets fuzzy because we're many, many decades removed from that scene now. And like we said before, the further we get away from it, the hazier it becomes and the harder things are to substantiate. So there have been accounts that those people went to Cass's house. Is it believable? Possibly, because Cass was very social and had gatherings for everybody many, many times. Anybody who was anybody went there. So, is given how free and easy it was back then, could they have gone there? Sure.
well,
It's a
he
fascinating
mentions
time.
it. He admits to it in a jail interview, and he rambles a lot. But there's certain moments, like I can tell when people are lying, and I can tell when Charlie is lying, and I can tell when he's saying the truth. And I believe he said the truth when he said that he saw her a few times at these house parties. It was not Cass Elliott's house. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Dennis Wilson's house and Elvis's house.
Possibly. That's the first I've heard about Elvis's house having any connection to this. But again, given how free and easy.
I mean, I hope I'm quoting it. I'm gonna find the original video. I'm gonna find the original video.
Not to doubt what
hopefully.
you're saying. Not to doubt what you're saying at all. It's so convoluted, and it's really hard to know what's true and what's not 6 decades on. But given the fact that it was such a different atmosphere than today, when people at that level had layers and layers and layers of security, which they didn't have back then, it's feasible to think that these lowlifes and this darker aspect of LA culture could infiltrate the elite famous world of celebrities without a whole lot of trouble. We did see it happen. It did happen at Cass's house. It did happen with parties that Terry gave at various locations. It did happen when those 2 guys got kicked out of the housewarming party that Sharon and Roman threw on March 16th of 69 or 15th. Those 2 guys, Dawson and Doyle, I think were their names, were removed from the party. They weren't invited. They just showed up because you could get away with that back then. The door was open. They knew somebody who knew somebody, so they came in. They got into an altercation, I think, with Bill Tennant, Roman's agent. Roman threw them off the property. And then there was a lot of things, a lot of conspiracy theories saying that, well, they were tied to the murders too because they were angry that they got thrown out of the party. So it's hard to know. It's hard to know. What we do know, though, is that she was a remarkable woman, and that we hope to do her justice with her portrayal in this series. And like I hinted at before, the way we leave it is going to be really, really beautiful. I think the image we leave of,
and I think
refreshing.
Yeah, but we're not going to spoil it. We're not going to spoil it. But I think what I find excellent with Sharon Tate's branding when it came to MGM in film ways was that they really gave her a Eurocentric quality. And you'll pay attention to this a lot in her interviews, especially that interview where she gets interviewed walking down Carnaby Street, which is in Oxford Street, by the way. Like I walked down that road. So it's nice. It's interesting because she does have a slight British tone. There's certain points, and I can tell that she spent time in Britain, and I'm actually shocked because you would think that if someone's first language is English and they're American and they were born and raised in the US, you would think their accent would never change. That usually happens if English is your second language and you just pick up other people's accents, sort of. But it's interesting how her voice is always slightly British. That there's a bit of early on, not later on, but early on when she was young.
Well,
there
she
were
did
a few
spend a lot
things,
of her formative years there. She spent a good portion of her formative years these, so it kind of makes sense.
Just some moments, even in the Eye of the Devil 1965 interview, which was released in 66, where she says, no, not really, not really. When she tries to clarify, there's just certain points and moments where she just sounds slightly British, but I think that Eurocentric quality where they kind of, you know, didn't just put her out as an all-American girl and kind of made
Mhm.
her mysterious, made it seem like she came from Europe, and all these interviewers were like asking her, where are you actually from? Oh, you're actually from Texas. Is genius, I think.
Mhm. Oh yeah.
Um,
One of the
compared because
sad parts too.
otherwise it would just be a Hollywood factory.
Mhm.
10 to 15 American actresses. Let's take them out
One
of the
of the
factory
yeah, and it was very much a studio
and
system
grill
back then.
them. Yeah.
One of the unfortunate things, just in terms of craft, that is sad is that we never got to see where she would have gone as a performer. You know, what would she have done after?
Yeah, but instead of trying, wondering, and wishing where she would have gone, what we can do is celebrate the films that she did star in, because I don't see people
Yeah.
doing that. I
No.
mean, I don't see, I don't see people talking about when she died, because I think my big issue is that legacy and media, there's a fine line. And unfortunately, if the media takes so much control over legacy, the media's perception and exploration and the way it shows legacy can be false, and it can take a dark turn. Because when Sharon Tate died, yes, of course, there was coverage covering the murders. It was such an important case. Everyone knew about it. I mean, my dad was 15 years old at the time, living in Cyprus, and he knew about the Manson murders. And he was like, oh, yeah, I remember when I was a kid, like over the summer, everyone was talking about this guy, this Manson guy. Like everyone, it was worldwide. Everyone knew about the Manson case. The sad thing is, though, they could have easily used the opportunity, because let's say that Sharon was trying her best, becoming established, but she wasn't ultra famous. She
No.
was well known in these circles. She wasn't ultra famous. If it's fair to say, she became famous after her death, if it's fair to say. But even so, people don't really know about her films that much, or her acting range. And I think it would have been so easy for the media to say, oh, you know what? This actress died. Let's take all of her films, all of the shows that she did early on in her career from the 60s, the early 60s, on the Beverly Hillbillies and all those different shows, and get them on let's get them on reruns. Let's get them on reruns.
Well,
Let's play her films again. I don't know why that couldn't have happened.
they did that actually in the wake of the crimes. The films were re-released with her name above the title in a lot of cases, trying to
Yeah.
maximize, because after that happened, she was became famous post-mortem. So the
Hmm.
films tried to capitalize that by being re-released in theaters, but with her name above the title.
Right.
So
But they did this with the intent for short-term cash, like
yes,
profits,
sure.
short-term profits, because
Mhm.
it wasn't a decade-long thing. Because what remains over the decades was the media deciding to, instead of saying we're going to showcase her film, let's do like a small segment, a talk segment, 10-minute segment, this actress, who she was, her life, her career trajectory. Instead of doing that, what the media has kept wasn't these reruns for that short period amount of time where it was still hot because it was still new.
Mm.
It was about, the media has preserved the Manson crimes and that final scene, which was, by the way, a recollection of the Manson killers and Susan Atkins describing to a cellmate what happened that night. And that's why everyone knew about it, because the cellmate snitched. And she was in jail for another entirely different reason. I believe it was a robbery or something.
Yeah.
And she eventually snitched on um, Susan Atkins, who claimed that, should I tell you something? Like, we were the ones who committed the crimes. I'm not gonna mention that. But the thing is, everyone's recollection and understanding from all the movies that we've watched and all the documentaries that we've seen of, the scene with the living room, Tex Watson appearing with a gun, how they were tied up. I don't even need to describe what happened during that crime scene, but the way we keep seeing it on film and on screen and keep remembering it is a recollection of the murderers. That's the only point of view that we're seeing. And
Yep.
yet we're seeing Abigail Folger, Wojciech Frykowski, Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, and I suppose Stephen Parent, the child that got shot outside, after visiting William Garretson, who
Right.
was taking care of the home, was living in Alta Belli's place. Stephen Parent tried to sell a clock radio to him. Um, so he got shot on his way out. So these people were only remembered by those last few moments. And this is my problem with Hollywood biopics, because none of these actresses know anything about Sharon Tate. It's very generic. Let's pick a
Right.
beautiful blonde. They don't even care about eye color. They'll pick blue-eyed actresses. Very daft, usually not very smart, not very articulate, not introspective. They just do a general casting, pick pretty bombshells with the Eye of the Devil 1965 wig,
And in a lot of cases, these movies
and they
they
just
don't even
play a
look like.
timid version, and
Yeah.
they just play a timid version of a woman expecting death, and that could be any woman expecting death. It doesn't have to be Sharon.
No,
So
you
what do
raised
these
a good
people know
point.
about Sharon really?
You
What
raised a
do they
good
know
point
really?
about her films. Let's look at them
Mhm.
briefly. Okay, so there were 6 major films aside from the television stuff. In each of those 6 movies, she played a pretty different character. So if you look at Eye of the Devil, she didn't have a lot of lines, but she had a great screen presence in there. She played this creepy kind of
Witch.
witchy character. Not
Mhm.
no humor in that at all. That was a serious dramatic role. Then she did Fearless Vampire Killer, which was very much kind of a veiled comedy, a different type of
It was
character.
satire. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd say it's satire. Yeah,
and then from
which is
there
ahead
it
of
was
its time.
right.
Yeah.
And then from there it was Don't Make Waves, where she was the quintessential California beach hottie. Again, very different from the previous two. And then
Yeah.
moving from that to Valley of
And
the
she hated
Dolls.
that film. She
Yeah,
really
it's
hated,
not a good movie. It's not what you call a great
but
movie.
she
Okay.
didn't like Valley of the Dolls either. She really disliked these bombshell roles,
Yeah, but
before
again,
they
that was
ruined
the
her
Valley of the Dolls was a
European god
different character.
stereotype, like typecast. She
Yeah,
really didn't enjoy Don't Make Waves and Valley of the Dolls because she didn't like those films at all. Um,
we never really got to see what she could have done on screen. But then she went from that to Wrecking Crew, which is a fun
yeah.
movie. And that may be her best character because she really has amazing comedic timing in that. And that kind of
Mhm.
hinted at what maybe she was capable of going down the line. But that's a very different character from Valley of the Dolls compared to all the other ones. And then 12 Plus One was her lead.
Mhm.
She carried that movie and well. That was also a different type of character. So over those 6 movies,
A European film and
yeah,
European cinemas. I think Eye of the Devil had a predominantly British production. The Fearless
yeah,
Vampire Killers was shot in Europe as well, directed by Roman Polanski. So I think aside from Don't Make Waves and Valley of the Dolls, uh, I think she was really into those European films. But The Wrecking Crew was an American production. It was
yeah.
quite good. So I think she liked those good old comedies. But
My whole point with
yeah,
bringing it up was that she had more of a range than she gets credit for.
sure. I agree. And more and she had more range than how she's portrayed, maybe, should we
Oh, absolutely.
say,
Oh,
in
absolutely.
films. Because
This is
I
again.
think they just base it off of one image. And here's another thing with Sharon Tate's portrayal, like Margot Robbie's portrayal of Sharon Tate in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Tim, have you seen Sharon? Because I see a lot of women try to recreate or dress up as Sharon Tate for Halloween or try to recreate her style on TikTok, and it's based off of this movie. How
Yeah,
many times have you seen Sharon Tate wear a black turtleneck, white go-go boots, and a white skirt? How
never,
many times have you seen that? Right.
never. But there were some outfits that I remember that looked like that, and they're kind of
Mhm.
iconic looks. Maybe that's why he went with it. I
Right.
don't. But again, it is kind of a one one dimensional kind of satellite portrayal in the past.
Yes. And it's kind
This,
of inaccurate. It's kind of inaccurate. Someone who wore black and white a lot, like in terms of the actresses, was Marilyn Monroe. You could also argue that Jackie Onassis wore that a lot. And this is actually power dressing. And I can't quote for sure, but I
she did.
remember
There's pictures of her in an outfit like that, but I don't think there were a lot of
probably just once. I probably just,
probably.
yeah, but even with the boots, there's probably one or two photos. It wasn't
I
what
don't even think
she,
she had the boots on. I think she had
yeah.
the black top and the white skirt. It
But the
looked
thing
really
is,
good.
that whole concept, black top, white bottoms, that is an element of power dressing, because power dressing isn't just monochromatic outfits, and monochromatic outfits doesn't just have to mean all black. It could be one color and going through different shades of the same color. That's also associated with power dressing. But another element of power dressing is dark on top, light on bottom. And that's something that Jackie O loved very much. And the reason why she wore black on top and white pants is because she wanted to avoid wearing the opposite to look like a waitress or a waiter, which would be a white button shirt and black. And it's interesting because when I was 17 and I was bartending, I got a bartending job like at a hotel, so it was at a responsible, acceptable like place. I remember I was wearing a white button shirt and a black skirt, and I was just like, Jackie O would hate me for this.
That's pretty common.
Not,
That's pretty common waiter attire, though. It always has been.
yes, but I think what she meant to say, I can't find the exact quote, but I know it was Jackie O that said this. I read it somewhere, and I don't think it's a quote that you'll find right away. But she didn't like the idea of looking like a waitress, and I'm assuming that we associate that job as a submissive job. So power dressing for her was wearing something bold and darker on top, black, and then white pants, which I find genius. And I wouldn't be surprised if Sharon, wore that, because Marilyn Monroe was seen wearing that as well.
Well, I think there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of glamour shots of Sharon. I mean, you can find it really easily. I tend to think, and I know you agree with this, that she looked best when her look was uncomplicated, as in like the Bill Ray shots that really kind of capture
natural. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, like this one behind me, that's a little bit made up. That was taken at Summerter's Drive in '68. She's got a little makeup on there, but it's pretty much a natural look. Those are the way I find her most appealing, when she looks just unadorned like her real self. And those Bill Ray shots from the same year probably capture those the best.
And that's probably what casting directors should be looking at as reference. If they want to cast an actress as Sharon Tate, they should be looking at what she looked like, not when she was dolled up and wearing a bunch of makeup and wearing the Eye of the Devil wig, the the blonde, and just assume that that's what she looked like. Because like I said, I think the problem with Tarantino's film is that it has created this epidemic of a very young fan base of girls who have just decided that Sharon Tate is this very beautiful girl from the 1960s. Let me look like her. Let me do my makeup like her. Let me do this. Let me do that. But that is not what she stood for, which is being a modern woman of your time.
Right. And I think we see that happen a lot because, that movie, we're about 6 years or so removed from when that movie came out. So that was a lot of young people did discover her then. But the problem is, especially in the age we live in now, when attention spans are about 8 seconds, people don't go beyond the surface. Like, oh, she was so pretty. Blah, blah, blah. I saw that movie and I wanted to know more about the real people. So I started digging in. And then the more you learn, you're like, wow, this woman was incredible. Wow, look at Jay Sebert. What an accomplished guy. You look at Terry and all the stuff that he did. The problem is people don't make an effort to go deeper than the surface. And we saw it recently with
superficial stuff, right?
The most recent example, without knocking anybody, but the most recent example of that is with the Bob Dylan movie. All of a sudden now the whole internet is getting, oh my God, Bob Dylan, he's so brilliant. Yeah, some of us have known that forever. Like, oh my God, Joan Baez was so cool. Yeah, some of us have known that forever. But there isn't a lot of diving deeper to find out more about his music.
Yeah.
He was more about Joan's life. Joan Baez is a fascinating woman. Her life story could be a movie in and of itself. But we just
I know you love her very much. I know you love her very much.
These movies come out and people just go nuts on the surface, but don't necessarily collectively try to dig any deeper.
Yeah.
And that doesn't, you don't really learn about people that way. You don't really learn about people or their work.
I think also the issue with Tarantino is that if he has this platform and he's able to create this epidemic, it would be good to get some things right. I mean, I think the biggest shame is that I think it's very clear that Deborah was.
Let's be careful.
Yes, we will be careful. But I think it's very obvious that Deborah was paid generously by Tarantino to be a part of production.
That's true.
Because Tarantino essentially asked for Sharon Tate's jewelry and personal items. Deborah is someone who has protected Sharon's legacy for the most part, and has tried her best to protect her sister's legacy. And she has spoken out about films attacking her sister. So I highly doubt that Deborah would very easily go to Tarantino and say, you can use this jewelry, you can use some of Sharon's personal items for your film.
No, actually,
Tarantino created a safe space for her to collaborate with him for the production.
He tells a story
So,
about that process.
Yeah, I'm sure he does, but I'm not interested. I'm not interested in Tarantino's process for that. I'm interested in the fact that you have created a fantasy out of Sharon Tate, which is great. You've brought people awareness to her life and stuff, but these style depictions are not 100% accurate. And even though she had limited screen time, I'm pretty sure by working with Sharon Tate's sister, there could have been more research done, not necessarily on Tarantino's behalf, but on the costume and department. They could have done more research and worked closer with Deborah to get more accurate portrayals of what her sister was like during that time.
True.
Because what we have now is an epidemic of young girls doing the 1960s makeup. I keep seeing it, the Twiggy's makeup, which is actually Twiggy's makeup because Twiggy invented that. It wasn't Sharon who made that. She wore it, but she didn't popularize it. It was Twiggy who created that lovely 1960s look. But the issue with this is that it's old-fashioned. Sharon Tate was a beautiful girl, but you are trying to emulate a girl from 60 years ago who, had she been alive today at her age then, today 26 years old, she wouldn't do her makeup like that. She would be modern. My issue is that it's old-fashioned, and it's like what people try to do with Marilyn Monroe. They try to copy her, and a lot of women will try to copy Marilyn Monroe and emulate her, but no one will fully be able to do it to the best extent, because sex appeal that is copied, especially from a very old generation, we're talking about the 50s and the old studio system, it's old. It's old-fashioned. Actors should be modern. I don't know.
Well, yeah, unless they're doing a period piece, then of course you try to.
Sure, that's fine. That's fine.
I think our bigger point is that we both feel that no production has really gone the way of trying to capture who she actually was alive, and I think that's probably the point. And I don't think that wasn't even Quentin's goal. I don't think with that, because it's the Rick and Cliff story with her and Jay kind of as background characters. No one's bothered to explore that aspect of her. Like, who was this woman aside from all the true crime stuff and aside from all the beauty aesthetics? You know, who really was she? And as a man, I'll tell you this. I think back to the quote from this movie from 2003. It was called "Something's Gotta Give" with Jack Nicholson and Diane Keaton. Even if you don't like romantic comedies, it's not really that. It's just a fun movie. But at one point, he's starting to fall for the Diane Keaton character, and he looks at her with those eyebrows, and he's like, "Babe, you are a woman to love."
I love Diane Keaton in Annie Hall, and I know we can't reference that movie because of the director or whatever, but she was good in Annie Hall.
She's a fantastic actress. It's a fun role she plays in that movie. But when he says, as a man, "You're a woman to love," I kind of think that's a line that you could apply to Sharon. She's a woman to love.
I think every woman is a woman to love, to be fair, Tim. Let's not be hard on the rest of the women on this planet.
But I'm just saying his sentiment in saying that was he was starting to fall for her, and he saw the beauty in her that a lot of others didn't see. So he's like, "You are one of the women that I could see myself loving," I think is what the point was. It's just a quote from that movie that makes me think of her. Like, beyond all the hype and the manner in which she died and all the other stuff that's been done over and over again when it relates to her, bottom line is she was a good woman. You know, she did have a
It's very interesting how you mentioned that, because I kind of agree.
Every other woman is not a woman to love, but I think that was his point. It was like, well, he could see the beauty in that character.
I think here's the thing. When it's probably easier if you look at all these different films, even if you look at European films, French films, especially French films, because they kind of explore their comedy. French comedy is more or less teasing the two sexes, men and women, and relationships. They tend to make comedy centered around that. So there's a lot of films where I feel that there's characters where there's lines like the ones you mentioned where you can probably sense more of Sharon than the way Sharon per se has been perceived or shown in all these different film depictions. And I think with Margot Robbie, I don't want to be too hard on her because I do want to say that in terms of the climate back then, so let's just say 2018, 2019 was when the film was released. So let's just say 2018,
Yeah, they
filming, casting,
filmed in
may
2018.
have right, may have even taken a year for to complete the casting. 2017, let's say, I believe Tarantino took Margot Robbie for lunch to pitch the script, aka oral agreements, handshake deals, oral contracts. How Hollywood conducts deal making 90% of the time. So that let's just say it was 2017. So a year in advance, right? So you have a year to prepare and you're looking to cast people. I believe Deborah said that Jennifer Lawrence shouldn't portray Sharon Tate because she's too ugly to play my sister,
No,
which is funny.
she wasn't pretty enough, I think is what
She
got her
wasn't
in
pretty
trouble.
enough.
Yeah.
Cheers, Deborah. Cheers, Deborah. At least Deborah is setting some standards here. So the thing is, Margot Robbie might have actually been an excellent choice to portray Sharon at the time if we're just looking at the climate of the film industry and the entertainment industry. In my mind, I can't really come up with any other actress who I would have chosen for Sharon. I mean, Margot, for the most part, there's two things that Margot has, which I'm happy with. She has the same face shape. She has the square face shape. She has defined hollow cheeks and stuff, which is what Sharon. So she
Well,
naturally has that face
she
shape,
got the look probably as close as someone who isn't
and
her
she has blonde
type.
hair.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have the same gaze as Sharon. Like if I see photos of them, and if I even if I see clips of them, I see two very different energies.
Hmm.
I see two very different
Well, and that's
energies.
what we're trying to do with making
Um,
the energies
and
match.
also with Margot Robbie, it shouldn't be a challenge to emulate Sharon Tate because does Margot Robbie actually look like Sharon Tate? No. Margot Robbie has had fillers, buccal fat removal, surgery. She's had a lot of work done on her face. So for the work that she's had done on her face, she's closer to emulating Sharon and the blonde hair. But in reality, Sharon was a very natural person. So
Well, and a
it's
lot of
not
that
that
didn't exist.
hard
It didn't exist back.
to, if you've had work done. Yeah. So, well, I do believe Marilyn has had nose jobs. So I do believe there was plastic surgery of some sort, but I don't think Sharon has had any surgery. I was
No,
always curious if she had a nose job.
no,
I
nothing.
will be
No,
honest, but
no, she
nothing.
didn't
No.
need it. She didn't need it. Come on.
Nobody needs surgery, Tim. Nobody needs plastic surgery. It's not about that. It's about people's insecurities and issues.
Well, and she also didn't get to
Uh,
in a life where she would have her looks started to fade. I mean, she's eternally 26 years old to the world.
Yeah, that's fair.
Um,
We are reaching like almost an hour and it's
yeah.
53 minutes, and I'm really worried that it's going to get ages for me to upload this.
Okay.
So I think we have to end it here.
We'll end it here.
I'm gonna let you have some closing words for our fellow listeners.
No, I think we covered a lot. I think we were fair and balanced with a lot of things we said. I think we did our best to portray her in the correct light as a real person who was here and lived and experienced good and bad with her own strengths and weaknesses, like every other person on the planet. Not a perfect angel. Again, don't demonize, don't deify, but she was a real living, breathing person who deserves to be portrayed on film as a complete person and not just a crime victim or not just this pinup girl or not a Malibu Barbie. You know, there was a lot more to her than that, which we hope that this series will lead people to realize. And we want to leave the audience with a very positive perception of her. Like, oh, this woman, okay, I see who this woman was. Like, this woman could be a friend. This woman is somebody I could possibly have known. This was a real person who was robbed of the chance to live her life very cruelly. And rather than dwell on that, we're going to look at the other stuff and leave the audience with a positive vision of this woman as Uncle Jack said, a woman to love. Among
But
many,
Uncle Jack,
among
yeah, but
many
he
women
didn't.
to love.
He didn't say that about Sharon specifically, but we can just
No,
pretend that he did.
no, it's just he
Pretty
said
sure
it.
if I pretty sure if we get Jack Nicholson and we find Uncle Jack, and well, he's in hiding, so it's not like we're gonna find him,
No, he's
unfortunately. But
very
I'm
comfortably.
sure, you know what? I love Jack Nicholson. I'm pretty sure, Uncle Jack, you have the stories. You have the Cielo stories. Uncle Jack knows the shit. He knows
He's
shit.
one of the few.
He knows all the gossip of the
Him,
times,
Warren Beatty, those he and Warren Beatty probably know a lot that they'll never talk about publicly, which is their choice, and I'm sure they just don't
which
want to.
is quite fair to. It's quite
Mhm.
good to be fair.
Yeah, yeah, it
It's
is.
quite
And
good.
so
Yeah.
you get the quote from him from that movie had nothing to do with Sharon, but the line makes me think of her, a woman to
That's
love.
fair.
Yeah,
That's fair.
among many women to love, but she was a woman to love.
All women, Tim.
That's what I just said. Come on,
All
man.
women. All
That's
women, Tim.
that's what I said. That's what I said. But the line, the way he delivered the line, has always kind of made me think of her. Like she was one
Yeah.
of
A
the
woman to
women
love.
you
Well, you
could.
know who else is a woman to? It always made you think of her. Sharon, someone you've never met. Tim, a woman to love should be your mom. That should be the first woman you
Well,
should
yeah,
be
but
thinking
that's
about.
different, and that's weird. That's not what
But
we're
that's the
talking about.
first thing. That's the first thing you should think about. Your
Not in that
mom. Come
context. That's
on.
weird. That's weird. No, the way
Love in a general, beautiful, like non way, like a beautiful way, the way we
no,
love people.
he
I
was
don't know.
talking. He delivered that line as a potential
In a
partner
romantic context, right? Okay.
as a
Because
part.
I
So
haven't, right. Okay. Because I
if you saw
actually, well,
if
I
you saw
haven't
the
seen it.
movie, if you saw the
Uh,
movie and the way the line was delivered, you'd get it. It's just a personal thing. It's not a
that's
big.
fair. I love Uncle Jack. I've enjoyed a lot of his films. I haven't seen that one, to be honest.
Well, I mean, he is
So
a little bit before your time, a little bit.
hey, he still made movies in like the 2000s and stuff. I saw a film that he made with was it Diane Keaton?
This is that one. This
No,
is
it's not.
something's got to give. Yeah, this is
That's
the
the
movie.
film.
Yes,
That's the film I've seen. That's the film I've seen
this is
from
the line
recent
that
years.
movie's come
Something's got
from.
to give from 2003. I don't
Yes.
remember that line.
Oh, it's classic. If you saw that, if you saw that part, you'd get it. Like, oh, I see what he's mean. I
To
see
be
what he's trying.
fair, Tim, I'm going to be honest. The only reason I've stumbled upon this film is because it was on Netflix.
It's a good movie. I like it.
That's the only reason why I've seen it. Like in 2003, I was like, how old was I in 2003?
Like
I mean, this
8.
is off topic, but like I was 7 years old.
You were single digits. Yeah. So you wouldn't have seen it when it came out. But that's
And
the
I was
movie.
actually 6 because my birthday's in December. So
Yeah, let's stop. You're making everybody else in this video feel old, which is me. But
so I
no,
was actually
that's the
6.
movie it's from. That's the movie it's from.
Yeah, okay. I can't believe this. So I remember that film. He was like hitting on that younger chick and then he falls for the
Yeah.
mom.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I remember that film distinctly because the actress who plays the younger girl, she was in a crazy film by what's his name? Perry.
You mean
She
Amanda
was in a,
Pete? Amanda Pete?
Amanda Pete.
Yeah.
So I like Amanda because her face, she has a generic Canadian woman face for me. Like I feel like the average Canadian woman has that face, like brunette with maybe she might get highlights light and dark in her hair, those blue eyes, that face shape. Like she has a very the fact that she is she even Canadian? If
I
she's
don't
not
know.
Canadian, like she's American. She's from New York. That's fair, but she has a very generic American, no Canadian face. That's what I mean. But she was in a crazy film, like a crazy film called Get Back,
No, I did not
right?
that one.
That's a crazy
I
film.
don't know.
No,
I don't
Get
know.
Out. Get Out. Get Out was the name of the film,
Oh no.
right?
Okay, I know what you mean, but I didn't see it. No, but something
Oh,
Gotta Give has a lot of classic lines in it. A lot of really funny lines.
yeah. But I remember her because she was in that film, and I remember her because I remember her face, and she has that generic Canadian woman face, which sounds mean, but like, yeah.
No, she's attractive. Yeah. Um,
Yeah. But I mean, like that's what like I saw like a lot of women look like that in Vancouver, like the brunette, blue eyes, which by the way is like stereotypically like generically like that's really attractive. Like brown hair and blue eyes or green eyes are like that's like really attractive. Like in a general sense, I think we can all agree that that's a beauty standard. Like everyone, like it's beautiful. But yeah, because it's
There's
more
a
interesting than just
there's
brown
a
eyes.
part
Brown
in
eyes are boring.
Something's Got to Give where they're riding in the car, and it's Jack and Amanda Peet, and they're ostensibly dating at that time. And she says something to him
I
like,
remember that because I
You're not
remember that film,
you're
but
not
I'm
even."
embarrassed now.
She says,
Yeah,
"You're not aware that you have a certain type." And he looks at her with the sunglasses and he goes, "Doll, you're overlooking one of the best things about me. I don't
yeah,
type." It's really, I don't have it.
yeah. I really
It's,
love Jack in that film. He was
oh,
great. And I remember that film. So I'm now embarrassed that you said that line. See, that line didn't ring with me. So you're probably thinking about
I don't know
Sharon
why
Tate
it
over
stuck with
time,
me. I don't know why it
if you
stuck. It
remember
wasn't a
that
big
line.
part
I
of
mean,
the
to
movie.
be fair, it's not an amazing masterpiece. It's not like
No.
a poet came up with it. It's just um
Well,
it's a generic, yeah,
I think even after he says that to her, she goes, "What is that supposed to mean?" So the meaning isn't
fair.
exactly clear, but it just, for some reason, some weird reason in my own head, that him delivering that line made me think of Sharon.
So that line never stuck with me. It's so funny how because I
It's not a big
specifically
line. I don't
remember
know why
this
it stuck with
film.
me either. It's not a big
I
deal.
I remember this film. I remember seeing this film on Netflix, but that line, I didn't remember it. So it's funny how when you watch a film, different things stay with you. But we are reaching, okay, it's been an hour, so we can't keep chatting. We
Yeah.
have to
Okay.
leave.
Okay.
So bye, guys. Sorry
Thanks
for
for
the chat.
watching.
Apologies for the Uncle Jack discussion at the end.
That was my fault. We went off on a weird tangent.
It's both of our faults because we both love Jack Nicholson. So what are we gonna do? Okay, what are we gonna do, you guys? So
We'll sign
so
off. We'll stay on after to talk a second, but more stuff is coming. Laurel Canyon, Terry Melcher, Jay Sebring,
lots of
more,
people,
lots of
lots of
people,
people.
lots of topics, which we'll get to
I was about to say
before.
lots of pop in there. Yeah.
Well, probably at
Okay.
some point he'll come up. Yeah. Bye,
Yeah, I was
everybody.
about to say lots of papa. Okay, just kind of rang through the anyway. Bye guys. Bye bye.